Well, hello and good evening to everybody, whoever's watching live or on the recording. Welcome. Day 4 of a really exciting week of events hosted by Neurodiversity in Education. And as that video said there at the beginning, a thought-provoking week, thought-provoking discussions, panels. We've had a lot going on this week, and I'm really delighted this evening that we've got a panel discussion on prison education and neurodiversity within the prison education environment. So welcome, sit back and relax and enjoy the chat. We have got comments available to you, so please feel free to add your comments or ask any questions that you may have for the panel in there, and we'll be keeping an eye on them, and hopefully we will answer those towards the end of the session. We may, if we might address them as we go along, but we'll see. Hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end to look at some questions from you. So I'd love to start off by welcoming my lovely guests for this evening. What I'll do in a moment is I'll hand over to them so they can tell you a little bit more about them. But I'm going to welcome our guests. So welcome. We're joined this evening by Sarah Jones, Sammy Morris-Bass and Lorraine Caesar. Thank you so much for giving up your time, your evening, to chat to us when really we ought to be sitting on the sofa with our feet up, didn't we, to be honest with you? But we're here. Thank you for joining us to celebrate Neurodiversity in Education Week. I'm really looking forward to this chat this evening. And I'm going to get you to tell us, as I said, a little bit about yourselves in a moment, in particular, why you are keen to talk to us about this topic, and you know, your organisations. Tell me a little bit about those as well. But I'm going to give you a very quick kind of like introduction myself first. So Sarah is the National Neurodiversity Manager for People Plus. And People Plus is one of the main prison education providers in prison education. She ensures that learners with a range of neurodiverse needs have access to specialist support and advice across the 22 prisons that her organisation's education teams run. And she also makes sure that you do timely neurodiversity screenings to identify barriers to learning, life and work. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, and then welcome to Lorraine Caesar also. So Lorraine is the Quality and Inclusion Manager for Milton Keynes College Prison Services. Now, Milton Keynes College is another one of the 4 principal providers that deliver education services in prisons across the country. Lorraine leads on support for learners across 30 of Milton Keynes prisons and continues to carry out assessments herself for learners who need access arrangements in exams. Good evening. Welcome, Lorraine.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, welcome to Sammy Morris-Bass. And Sammy is the Neurodiversity Support Manager for HMPPS, His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service. And she formerly worked for Milton Keynes College Prison Services as well. So I'm sure that you know each other there on the panel. Sammy's a neurodiversity specialist who's got over 6 years experience of working for prison education. She's got a strong passion for offender learning and reducing reoffending. Welcome, Sammy.
Oh, thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome. Okay. And before I hand over to you, I'll just introduce myself for those of you watching in and wondering who I am. So my name is Rachel Owner, and I'm a co-director of Neurodiversity in Education. And my interest in prison education, well, it's twofold, really. Firstly, I worked in this environment. I was an education manager for 4 years at a large Cat C prison in Norfolk. And since I left that role, I've continued to work with prison education, training prison teachers and assessors. And for the last 3 years, I've run the Essential Skills and Inclusion Network, which is currently sponsored by the Prisoners Education Trust, to get together practitioners who work in the field of English, maths, digital, ESOL and neurodiversity. I'm neurodivergent myself. I have a degree of dyslexia and Erlen syndrome. So this whole conversation is right up my street, really. So enough about me. I'd like you, please, ladies, if you don't mind, just to introduce yourselves a little bit more. In particular, tell me about yourselves, your background, and why this topic of neurodiversity is important to you. So Sarah, would you like to kick off the conversation?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I've been in education, both outside of prison education, for around 20 years now. So the majority of my career, I was a teacher of geography, but also a Senko as well. So I've been in the field of special educational needs in outside education for a considerable period of time. So I've worked with mainly children in outside education, right from primary school through to secondary school. So worked for 15 years as a Senko, but then have also worked in local authority as a specialist teacher for young people with autism, and then moved to Norfolk and worked in a specialist complex needs setting for children with developmental trauma. So pretty much my whole career, as well as teaching geography, has been immersed in kind of supporting those with neurodiverse needs, supporting families and young people and communities that surround them in relation to neurodiversity. So kind of 5 years ago, moved into prison education and kind of help support adults throughout the adult prison estate. So extensive field and background in this area that has absolutely helped move into the prison education field, which 5 years later is everything that I do day in, day out. So that's me.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And you've got a big smile on your face, so I'm hoping that means that you still enjoy it.
Absolutely. I always say no 2 days are ever the same, but I think that is really an interesting part of the role, because needs can present that you maybe haven't seen for a period of time, and co-occurring needs as well. So every day is a different challenge, which is really enjoyable.
It's definitely not a boring field.
No, it's not.
Absolutely not. Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Okay, and Lorraine, would you like to say a little bit more about yourself, please?
Yeah, so I've worked in all sorts of different fields of education for just over 30 years. That sounds like a very long time. It makes me feel quite old. I started out teaching ESOL. Then I moved into adult and community education, and I did a lot of family learning and outreach. I did lots of work with disadvantaged groups. I worked with travellers. I worked with ex-offenders, families who were struggling. But at that point, I'd got I hadn't had any formal training with working with people who were neurodivergent, but obviously lots of the people that I came across had, really struggled to access education. And the more I did with family learning, the more I got interested in thinking that I'd like to get involved from the very beginning. So I retrained as a primary and early years teacher. And then, like Sarah, became school Senko and started to build up knowledge there. And then 9 years ago, I was thinking, I don't know, shall I go back to working with adults? And I was just looking to see what was around, and I saw a job as a Senko for Milton Keynes Prison Services, and I've been here ever since. And like Sarah, it's endlessly interesting, can be very frustrating, can be very rewarding, but no 2 days are ever the same. And I think what I really enjoy about the job is when you're working with someone who's struggled and been disengaged with education, and sometimes just really simple things, sometimes just listening to people, asking the right questions, can make such a difference. And you just see people blossom and thrive.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Absolutely, totally agree with you. Thank you very much. That's a great insight there, Lorraine. And Savi, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Hello. So my journey has been mainly through prison education. So that is where I kind of started my journey, and that's something that I've continuously been passionate about through my kind of career. So I started similar to Lorraine, so teaching ESOL and then moving into the world of English and maths mainly. And one of the things that really kind of I recognised was dealing with people who may have had a poor experience of education and looking into supporting those individuals. And then as you go through, the neurodiversity seems to crop its head, and looking into supporting those individuals. So I worked as a teacher, and then made my way into middle management from there of the education kind of department and team, overseeing our inclusion practitioner and supporting them in terms of their role and making things more kind of accessible. So from there, I've moved over into HMPPS. So I am now the neurodiversity support manager for HMPPS. There is one of us at each site across the prisons. So I work with everybody, and what I really enjoy is that there is such a strong element of supporting prison education and really advocating for what our education service provides and really supporting them, because their inclusion practitioners do so much, and they need, it's good for them to be recognized for what they do. And yeah, without them, neurodiversity in prison education would really not be seen to what it is now.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I agree with everything that everyone has said so far about the fact that no 2 days are the same, that it can be challenging, it can be frustrating, but it can be extremely rewarding. And yeah, it is. And it's great. And I think we'll probably come back to that at some point in our conversations, but it's really great now that there is a lot of joined up working within the prison education services. It's greatly improved, hasn't it? It's a lot better than it was before, when there was a bit more sort of silos going on, with everybody having the same issues, of course, the same levels of neurodiversity and challenges within their prisons, but less opportunities to share and to help each other out with that. So that's great. Okay, thank you. So we'll get the conversations going. I thought what I'd do is just set a tiny bit of context for the viewers who might be watching this about neurodiversity in prisons, really. And there's two bits of data out there that if you search for it, that sort of talks about the number about neurodiversity in prisons, and talks about the number of prisoners who are neurodivergent. And probably the sort of the biggest number that you would find straight off is Ofsted, who said that their findings say that 1 in 3 prisoners, or almost about 30%, have a learning difficulty or disability, and they add that that's often diagnosed when they are in prison. However, there are also many that think that that's a rather conservative estimation, and I can see you nodding all straight away. And yeah, many that think that's a very low estimation, and there could be up to 50% or more who might have a neurodiversity need. And obviously in 2021, we had the Joint Inspectorate Review and evidence there published in the Cross-Government Neurodiversity paper, and off that was created the Criminal Justice Action Plan, and as part of that work, these neurodiversity officers are now in place across the sector. And since April 21, the prison service has identified, I read yesterday, at least 25,000 prisoners who are enrolled in education who have a learning disability or difficulty. But as we all know, all of us who work in neurodiversity, there are many more that go undetected, undiagnosed, and many that are self-diagnosed, etc., etc. So it's a big topic. And, those proportions compared to other educational environments, it's significant, isn't it? So I'd like to sort of kick off the conversation really by get us talking about this prevalence and the work that is actually going on within the prison service and in the education departments. So in particular, I'd like to sort of ask, how does this prevalence of neurodiversity play a factor in prison education, you know, in its planning, in its delivery? Yes, where does it stand really? So Sarah, would you like to kick us off on that one? I'm doing it in the order that you appear on my screen, sorry.
No, absolutely. And I think we've done a lot of work behind the scenes, and I know I've worked really closely with Lorraine. We've got a cross-provider prison education group that we all collaborate with. I think one of the biggest things that we had to get right was actually ascertaining the needs that were either present, diagnosed outside of prison, or on entry to the prison that were self-diagnosed by prisoners that accessed education. So we have a very successful two-stage screener. What the first rapid screener is conducted at induction, so that gives possible indicators of a need, and then we have neurodiversity specialists when a prisoner enrolls in education, can actually conduct a more detailed look at any needs that may be presenting. So we often refer to that as the detailed screener. So that identification as to the need, the barrier to learning is absolutely key. And as early as that can be kind of done, it allows you to put the right support, the right approaches, the right reasonable adjustments in place in education. But more importantly, with the kind of introduction of neurodiversity support managers, that sharing of information is absolutely key, and everybody working together is key as well. So including healthcare or the prison partners like Shannon Trust, libraries, to actually have almost like a team around the prisoner that is providing the right support and approach from the outset. And all of the research out there says the quicker you can identify, put the right support, it's successful support, the likelihood is it's going to be more successful. So I think for me, screening and support in a timely fashion is really, really key. So we're very lucky. Our neurodiversity specialists across our 22 sites do a sterling job day in, day out in providing that support and identifying, using the kind of national screeners that we have in place to start that journey off. Other things beyond that, considering the curriculum offer, and actually each of those individual starting points are very different and need to be tailored with reasonable adjustments from the outset.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
I think if I can just jump in, adding to what Sarah was saying, I think that cross-provider working as well, we've set up a really good system for sharing information. So if a prisoner does a screener at one site, that follows, it's almost like a passport, it follows them to their next site. So in the past, that sort of looking for those starting points sort of started again, whereas now the work that's been done with a different provider or in a different prison will follow that prisoner, so that the staff in the jail that they've transferred to has got that information and knows what works. They've got a support plan straight away. I think that's been another really key development in the last few years that's made a big difference for people.
Yeah, because for those that are not that familiar with the prison system, might be surprised at just how many times a prisoner might move from one establishment to the other, and how important it is to have that trail of information that follows them. So that they don't have to go through a screener time and time again, that they are being received by people who've got the information and that, you know, don't start off on the back foot really. Yeah. And Lorraine, in your role, you know, in quality in particular, I mean, how much does neurodiversity play a part in what you have to do on a day-to-day basis with planning and
Well, I think, as Sarah said, it's key really when you're looking at the curriculum, it's just the basics of teaching and learning. If you were teaching in an FE college or a school, you might think that neurodivergent needs were something additional, that maybe you're looking at a group of 2 or 3 people, whereas in prison education, particularly the statistics that you were suggesting of sort of, you know, between 30 and 50% probably across the prison are accurate. But if you think about the learners that we're working with in education who tend to be lower levels, I mean, I know we're also working with our OU and our higher levels, but the vast majority of prisoners in education within PEF, a lot of them are entry-level functional skills. We've probably got a large proportion of that, 30 to 50%. So within our classes, probably some of them have got 60 to 70%. So I think for our staff, planning for neurodivergent needs is the norm rather than the exception. So it's also making sure the staff have got the right training, that they've got the right support, they've got the right information. And I know that's one of the questions that you were looking at later on, but I think that training for staff is absolutely key, because it is a different outlook to working in a lot of other educational sectors.
Yeah, it's almost like you're training for a special, you know, needs environment.
Yeah.
In that respect, isn't it? Yeah, with those kind of proportions. Yeah, and that's exactly right. You know, to make that point out that, you know, actually within education, where the focus is so high on the basic skills of English and maths, and that those learners will be of a much lower level compared to mainstream FE. Yeah, that of course neurodiversity is going to be more prevalent in that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Sammy, what about yourself? So you've got a wider perspective of this now, but also, as you say, working with all of the PEF providers. How do you approach this? How do you feel about this?
So the biggest positive is the sharing of information. The information that the education teams have is vital to that individual, and the fact that that information is now accessible and can be shared across different parties to make sure that that individual is getting that support, not just in education but across all kind of elements of prison life is great. I like to think that beforehand, an individual would come along to education, they would get all of that support, they would be really, there'd be that person-centered approach in terms of supporting that person, and then as soon as they left the education department, then that was it. And now with this sharing of information, we're now able to take this vital information that is available and really implement it into day to day, so that individual is supported so much more, and there's an understanding of that person's needs. So within education, like Lorraine was saying earlier, in terms of planning and delivery, I'm speaking on my own experience here, that you plan for the individual. You've kind of moved away from there being that, yes, you have a set curriculum, you have a set lesson plan of what you need to teach for that day, but you're going on what the people in your classroom need, and if they need different, if everybody needs something different, then that's the way it be, because as Lorraine and both Sarah have said, the neurodiversity need is so high, and you're also dealing with people who may have a diagnosis, maybe self-diagnosing, but also may not even know that they have a neurodiversity need. Definitely within kind of the older population, there's very much of, well, this is just how I do things, and this is what's always worked for me, and it's kind of you're learning, as you know, you're learning yourself in terms of how to support that person. So yeah, so that's it's great.
And I think adding to that, and Sarah, you kind of alluded to it at the beginning there about sort of co-occurrence, because we all know about co-occurrence within neurodiversity, and I think there can be a tendency, can't there, in many sort of streams of education to focus on the main diagnosed or the only diagnosed neurodiversity need, when there will be other co-occurrences there that also need supporting. And so it's important for anybody in this role to make sure that the support that you're giving it enables all different aspects of their challenges and difficulties to be supported.
And
really.
That's the key thing of our role, is that we don't work on diagnosis. We're purely needs-based. So where there's a need, the support is available. And I think that's a really key thing about our role. And I think that's really positive.
Yeah, because we like to label, don't we? We like to label people. We love it. Yeah, we like to label, this person is dyslexic, this person is autistic, etc., when actually to have a different kind of approach to it and a different mindset, and talk about the needs of the individuals, and the support mechanisms that you can put in place that will help different aspects of their challenges, and by default then help others within the classroom as well, with similar challenges.
I think the thing is, you're not just talking about people with a neurodivergence. You're often looking at trauma, you're looking at substance misuse, brain injury. I mean, it's like a tangled web of needs. So as Sammy said, often what the role is to establish what the greatest need is at the moment that needs support, and to put support in for that. And then you can look at other things later on. It would be very, very difficult, wouldn't it? I think with a lot of the learners that we work with, to actually give them a label. They'd have a list, possibly.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
I think it has to be like both Sammy and Lorraine have mentioned, that holistic look at that particular individual, because the presenting barriers can fluctuate between different courses. So I know we've had multiple conversations where an individual may have a high need in English, but an absolutely amazing mathematician. So needs can change over time, needs can fluctuate. And I think the beauty of the systems and processes we have in place, all our documents are working documents, so they're not sat on a shelf gathering dust. They evolve over time as different needs present. And I think Lorraine mentioned that trauma in the background has to be considered throughout, because sometimes the conventional approaches and strategies may not work based on the trauma that particular prisoner has experienced. So that whole look at the individual and targeting what needs are presenting at a particular time is absolutely key.
Yeah. Okay, absolutely. Thank you. Well, the next thing that I wanted to bring up, and I couldn't decide how to actually word this kind of question really, but it's the thing about the challenges that we have. And you've already mentioned quite a few challenges that we have, but thinking about neurodiversity in prisons, and do you think, even though there's been some big strides made in appointments of staff and roles, etc., what are the challenges that still exist for you around this topic? In the prisons itself, is there referrals good enough for you? Are they robust enough? Are there obstacles in your way? Have you got any comments on that at all? Lorraine, should we start with you?
I think the support has got so much better, but I think you could double the support, triple the support, quadruple the support, and still struggle to meet the needs of very complex prisoners. I mean, within the education department, if you've got a big department, you might have sort of 50 or 60 prisoners coming in over the period of a week who are neurodivergent. And I'm sure in Sammy's role, where she's looking at the wider prison, her numbers are going to be enormous. So having one specialist within the prison, one specialist within a department, you're really needing to get other people on board. And, again, it's back to partnership working, but I don't think you could ever have enough support probably for you know, to meet the needs of the, you know, people that we're working with.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Sammy?
Yeah, I fully agree with what Lorraine is saying, and I love to think that, as you know, my role is new. We've only been in post for a few years, and I like to think the more that the role develops, the more that, and hopefully we end up with maybe a team and grow into a department even of, and just recognizing how many individuals need that neurodiversity support and how vital neurodiversity training is. So I totally agree. I don't know whether I'd love to be able to support everybody. I know that we all would. It's what we live and breathe, but just the sheer numbers, and there's only a few of us. So, but all we can do is keep our fingers crossed that the role develops. I like to think that every department started out as one person. So let's, you know, all that we can keep doing is just advocating about how important this is and the support that is there and why it needs to be kind of brought up.
If I look back 9 years ago when I started, though, I don't think that I ever imagined, Sammy, that there would be people in your role. That was the dream. So, and now it's the reality. So, do you know what? Maybe if we look forwards, there will be a whole team in the, you know, the future. So,
I love that idea of the balance tipping the other way to the actual, you know, have more neurodiversity specialists than maybe, maths and English specialists, for example. Yes, and we've got a comment there saying power and unity. I completely agree. Yes. Sarah, have you got anything to thoughts to add to it?
I think, like Lorraine said, we could always have more support, but I think one thing to consider is the right support put in place for individuals. So not just throwing support at an individual for namesake or lip service. So the right support, that actually that monitoring process to ensure that support is having a positive impact. And if things need to be tweaked in that support, whether it's getting on board other partner agencies, so be it. And I think that is absolutely key. When we say we need more support, it's being specific about what that other support does look like. So we're not flooding just any old support just to tick a box. I think it's the importance of the type of support and the right support for the individual. I think we've come a long way in the 5 years I've been in prison education. Did I ever think the neurodiversity support manager role would exist? No, that we've come a long way over the 5 years. And I think partnership working is continually improving and refining itself. And I think give it another 12 months, 2 years, there'll be a much more robust kind of partnership working. We've seen massive inroads already. I think that will continue.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you. I think we seem to have lost Sammy for a moment. Let's hope that she can rejoin us. But I'm gonna talk about that topic that Lorraine said that she knew I was coming to, because you both know that that's a topic which is very, very close to my professional heart, and that is one of teacher training. And I'd like to discuss the topic of teacher training for supporting for teachers and supporting neurodiverse and neurodivergent learners, really. So I'd like to know from you whether you think there's enough training for prison education staff at the moment. There might be people watching this or watching on playback that are considering going back into training, teaching in prisons for the first time, and they want to know a lot about it. And, you know, we've already said there's a big prevalence there. But yeah, what do you think about that? Is there enough? If not, what would you like to see? Sarah, do you want to start us off?
I think, I did a PGCE at university, and I think I got an hour-long lecture about special educational needs at the time. I don't think it's anywhere near enough in university taught courses. And some of those courses don't necessarily talk about prison education. It's often the forgotten sector that isn't promoted on that initial teacher training course. It's a far off, distant thing that nobody ever talks about, or nobody encourages individuals doing those kind of qualifications at university to even explore. I think we as an organisation have partnered with a couple of the universities surrounding our prisons to do talks to trainee teachers to actually talk about what prison education can offer as a career and the progression within that. That is an important piece of work to attract kind of qualified teachers who may just go into mainstream education, children's education. Actually, it's capturing and advertising the fact there is a whole other sector out there that the individuals can go into. I think there needs to be a more robust program in terms of neurodiversity in those university courses. When we recruit staff, we make time as part of that induction to deliver a whole session about neurodiversity and ongoing support for all of our sites to ensure that those staff have the grounding and background in neurodiversity. We've developed a kind of resource Padlet, one-stop shop for tutorials recorded by myself on all particular conditions, resources, fact sheets. So staff have got instant access to information if they come across a particular need of an individual that they've never worked with before. Actually, they've got an opportunity to upskill themselves. We also offer a fully accredited level 3 neurodiversity specific qualification for our neurodiversity specialists. So there is that ongoing accredited CPD. So they have all the tools, all the skills to be able to support individuals in our education team. So I think it's giving everybody all the tools in the toolbox that they need and providing various mechanisms in order to do that effectively.
Yeah. Well, we've had a comment put into one of the chat there about you making a very good point about the amount of the amount of content that you get in initial teacher training, full stop, on Ascend, and it's woefully bad.
Oh, it's appalling. It makes me embarrassed that actually nobody has driven it at a far higher level in universities to really reshape the teacher training course, because even in outside education, the school to prison pipeline, actually it's looking at the skills that the teachers in education outside of prisons have and what kind of taught delivery they have at university. So I think it needs a huge overhaul and needs to be way better than it currently is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Some really good points. Yes, Lorraine.
And my experience is similar to Sarah's. I did both a post-16 and a primary PGCE, and I doubt that I had an hour of training about special needs or neurodivergence in either of them. There were sessions on barriers to learning, but that was probably as far as it got. And I know when I started teaching in schools and first had to sort of think about how to support children who were struggling, if I hadn't had the experience that I'd had working in the community, I think I would have been completely unprepared. I would have really struggled. And even doing SENCO accreditation, an awful lot focused on local authority systems rather than actually understanding how to support children and young people. Like Sarah, we offer various qualifications, level 2 and level 3 in specific learning difficulties, autism, understanding reasons for behaviour, understanding how mental health impacts on education. Some of our teachers go through our own level 3, level 4 teacher training, which is designed for prison education staff, so has a greater emphasis on supporting neurodivergent needs. But obviously we also get teachers coming to us from other sectors. who've probably had the same woeful training that, you know, the rest of us had. Within the quality team, we offer training on a regular basis and support. You know, it's difficult to get round all the prisons, but we're always on the end of an email, and there are regular sort of CPD sessions. Just this week we had a day in Milton Keynes for our inclusion practitioners to look at what the needs were and to talk about sort of sharing good practice and how they're supporting staff on site. So it's an ongoing you know, it's an ongoing need, but I think going back to that initial teacher training, there really needs to be a much stronger emphasis, not just for the benefit of prisoners, but maybe if we could get it right lower down in school, then, you know, that when people come to us as adults, those, you know, strategies would be in place and the needs wouldn't be quite so extreme.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that we've talked about in our team in this organisation, about the desperate need to lobby for a larger content, larger percentage of the content of teacher training to be focused on neurodiversity needs. It's absolutely essential. You know, it really is. So hopefully, yeah, we will get there eventually. Welcome back, Sammy.
Hello, thank you. I don't know what's going on, so apologies.
No worries. We were just having a little chat about the level of training and support given to staff in education that are, you know, is it enough, basically? Have you got any particular opinions on that one? Well, maybe not. Maybe we've lost Sammy again.
It looks like she's frozen, I think, Rachel.
Like she's frozen. She's scared stiff to answer the question. No, she's frozen. Bless her. Okay, while we wait for Sammy to come back in, and thank you. We've just seen that Oliver has joined us as well. So Oliver is saying that he's been in prison education for 2.5 years. There we go. And the development of support is growing so much. There is so much more awareness out there. So yes, a lot of improvements, still some work to do. But yeah, we agree, Oliver, there's been a lot of improvements made. Okay, so carrying on with the theme of staff. Okay, now if we were to say that 15 to 20% of the general population of the country is neurodivergent, per se, then the same kind of percentage must be there within your teacher groups and your support teams. So I don't know whether you're able to answer this question, but do you have any provisions in place to help support neurodivergent teachers at all? Sarah, I can see you nodding.
I think one thing is to foster that kind of culture where it's okay to declare a need. I think we've come miles in prison education that we've encouraged learners to self-declare and embrace needs that they have. And I think that's naturally fostered an environment where staff feel happy in some cases to be able to share their neurodivergent needs. And I think, like we've said with our learners, actually timely support. So we have some staff that declare needs at the point of interview when they first start, and I think that important kind of reasonable adjustments plan that can be drawn up at that point and shared with key staff, it is key to ensure that the reasonable adjustments that are required for that staff member are put into place from the kind of first week that they're in post. It is key. We're quite lucky as an organisation. We can tap into an employee assistance programme with an outside organisation. So I know we've had people able to access diagnostic pathways through the employee assistance programme, but there's a team of kind of counsellors, people to signpost to other support agencies if staff feel it's something that they don't necessarily want to disclose to a manager, but want it kind of confidential with an outside organisation. So I think twofold, that reasonable adjustments plan in place for that staff member with really useful adjustments aligned to their needs, and access in our case to an employee assistance programme and a wellbeing app it can help support needs amongst our staff group. But that fostering and culture of it's okay to be kind of, I always say difference, not deficit, which I know is a cheesy tagline, but it's encouraging people to understand that difference is nothing to be scared of or ashamed of. It's something that you can embrace, and there's lots of strengths that individual may have.
Absolutely. Yeah, great points. Thank you. Yeah, Lorraine, what's your viewpoint on it?
No, I would agree. I think those open conversations are really important. And sometimes it links back to, yes, absolutely, seeing that comment. There are definitely strengths in difference. But I think often when you're delivering training about neurodivergence within the staff teams in prison, people will very often say, oh, do you know what? That's me, or I hadn't realised, I do that. And it starts those conversations and that level of openness. I think that as access to digital technology has got better in prisons, that helps to support a lot of our staff. So when I started, everything was paper-based. It's still a challenge in some sites, and I'm sure that if we've got staff listening from some sites, they'll be pulling faces and thinking that's not happening where I am. But actually, it is easier to type up, if you're dyslexic, it's easier to access a computer to type up feedback to a learner so that you can use a spell check or you can use speech to text that just you couldn't have imagined doing a few years ago. So, yeah, it's definitely about it's being okay to be different, recognizing that there are strengths in difference, and actually that it's okay to have conversations to work out what adjustments are needed. Often, we've got staff who perhaps need longer with their paperwork or need different paperwork, and putting the same things in place that we would for our learners.
And of course, it's a very pressurized environment to work in. It can be very stressful sometimes. Education can full stop, but you have got an additional layer there, haven't you, working in prison environment. And alongside neurodivergence, you have added anxiety, you have other needs that will be there because of that pressurized environment as well. So I like the fact that, Sarah, you're talking about well-being apps and access to support services and things. And I think it is also important to allow staff access to them, but also give them some leeway and reasonable adjustments themselves in terms of their ability to cope with the pressure that's going on as well. Because, as you say, it's probably doubly hard if you've not already not admitted or wanted to declare that there's a potential challenge there, but then having to mask that as well is quite challenging, isn't it? I think
it's also we have sorry.
No, carry on. No, you carry on.
I think we have a lot of staff members that also have children with neurodivergent needs and actually need to seek out maybe some support to understand maybe a new diagnosis or signposting. So I know various staff have reached out to me to be able to say, can I run something past you? Can you signpost me to a particular organisation, which I think is also important for staff wellbeing. As you said, it's a very pressurised environment. Factors at home actually are equally important in that whole person and can't be forgotten. There's a family behind it, some individuals with neurodivergent needs. So I think support can also come in that fashion as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Lorraine, I think you were...
Sorry, Lorraine.
No, that's all right. I think I was going to say that I think the need to support staff really became a much bigger issue than we were aware of during COVID, because prisons were locked down for so long. We were suddenly relying on staff to create paper, to to deliver their teaching on paper and create paper resources, and to get them into cells when they couldn't physically have contact with their learners. So people who are hugely talented and articulate speakers and demonstrators suddenly found that they hadn't got the same skills to put that knowledge on paper. So, or people who were sort of struggling working in a different way and finding it difficult to adapt. I think it sort of brought things to the fore that strategies didn't work anymore. So that really made us think about the neurodivergence among our teams, not just the teaching teams, but just, the whole organisation. And that need to understand that not everybody works in the same way.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, definitely that the whole pandemic period has, and in a way, actually, I think there's been real advantages about the fact that people feel a little bit more open now to talk about mental health and therefore potential neurodivergent needs as well. Yeah, thank you for those points. It's really nice to hear that there's some support there, because that's one of the things that Neurodiversity in Education as an organisation is really, really keen on promoting, the fact that we talk an awful lot about supporting our learners and the adjustments that we need to put in place, and less so for staff. So let's hope that that is a topic that can now grow, and be just as important. It'd be lovely to see it there discussed right as, and accepted in induction or through training processes, all the way through, deeply embedded into all of our processes, really. I think we've got time for one other quick question, because thinking about going back to our prisoners now and thinking about supporting prisoners and the importance of developing independence, building up to release, how effective do you think that the support is for developing independence for building for prisoners up to release at the moment? Sarah, what do you feel about that?
I think it relies on partnership working again. We're part of that prisoner's journey almost, and in isolation we're far more powerful working together than we are in isolation. I think definitely there is a need for that information to be shared with kind of as part of that release planning, to ensure that kind of transition into the community is effective. I think equally we've done a considerable amount of work, I think, as a cross-provider group and nationally, to get away from that kind of Velcro, what I call the Velcro model of support. So actually the support encourages the independence from the outset, so that learner doesn't get reliant on the support, and when it goes away or they are released, it falls to pieces because they haven't developed their own strategies, their own support mechanisms to be able to do that. So I think part of our role in prison education is to build up those tools, those strategies, those self kind of regulating strategies as well, as part of that build up to release, to ensure that it doesn't, they have all the tools when they're released to be able to use them effectively. I think that Velcro model of support doesn't work, because then as soon as that support is taken away, everything falls to pieces. So definitely partnership working and encouraging that development of those kind of self-regulation strategies from a very early period is key.
Yeah, brilliant. And I mean, I don't know, excuse me, I don't know, Lorraine, whether you're able to answer this, but is the partnership working with those organisations within prisons that deal with learners towards and after release? Is that in place? Is that, do you think that's strong enough?
I think it very much depends on the local area. It depends on the services that are in place in each local area. So we work across such a huge region. We've got prisons sort of from Durham down to the Isle of Wight, and stuff from Wiltshire across to the Isle of Sheppey. So I think in some places it's getting better, but like everything, there's still still room for improvement. And it's a shame that Sam is not here, because I think that's one of the things at the last cross-provider meeting that we were talking about, that some of the NSMs have got that, they've got better contacts with some of those services than we have working within education. So, you know, they are beginning to make sure that those support plans are shared, and that, you know, that people are aware when they are preparing prisoners for release that, you know, there are sort of perhaps certain things that they need to be aware of, or, you know, additional support that they may need.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And talking of Sammy, she's just sent me a message to say she's so sorry. She's not sure what's happening with her internet, that it's crashed, and she's come back and it's crashed again. And she sends her apologies to everybody, but she's happy to answer any questions that come her way. So if we do have any, we can pass them on to Sammy. But if you're watching Sammy, don't worry at all. It happens. We're used to technical issues by now. So thank you. So in the general, and we're hearing some lovely positive things. And I've noticed we've got a comment from Sarah, who says that when we were talking about the support for neurodivergent teachers and the support that you employ, and she says, I am that parent and the teacher. It's great to be able to have that connection at work. So yes, Sarah, thank you for that comment. That's really valuable. So yeah, great stuff. Great improvements that have been made, I think, really. You know, I think we're on the right trajectory here to and I completely agree. I never would have imagined that we would have the posts in place that we do now, and let's just hope for some further improvements on that one. Is there anything, if you had a wish list, I'm going to throw this one in, if there's anything you have a wish list of any other improvements that you might like to see in place, what would you like to see? Anything, any ideas? I'm putting you on the spot here with this question, but are there anything that you'd like to see?
I'm going to throw a curveball out there. I think there needs to be closer working with outside education and prison education, because I think definitely, and I think Lorraine would agree, we hear pretty harrowing stories of how outside education failed individuals, and how bouncing from PRU to specialist provision to PRU to out of education. I think there needs to be a government investment in looking at that school to prison pipeline to try and limit and kind of not revert. You're never going to reverse it, but I think investment needs to be put to stop that pipeline opening any wider, if that kind of makes sense. I think you definitely hear time and time again how school has not been successful, and it makes that individual less trusting of education and quite scared in some cases to actually trust those individuals. And it takes the skill of the staff in our education teams, and I think Lorraine would agree, in building up that trust and them seeing education can be a safe space. But I think money needs to be placed in that arena to try and stop the continuous flow and failure that we see.
We also need to look at the care system, because we haven't touched on the percentage of prisoners who've been through the care system. And again, it goes back to that impact of trauma, doesn't it? And a need to put support in for acquired learning difficulties at an earlier stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And we know that so many prisoners end up actually in prison, and the root cause of it might have been, you know, behavioral issues caused by ADHD, for example, or addictions again caused by ADHD, etc. And of course, you know, a lot of our learners who have dropped out of school, you know, and because of that very reason. So thank you. And Simon's put in chat there, I think there's a review of AP provision at the moment for that very reason. So thank you for that. So I've been looking, and I don't think we've got a couple of minutes. If anybody's got any questions for our panel this evening, I can't see any coming in. Were there any sort of final comments that anybody wanted to make while we're just waiting to see if there are any questions? You're looking positive.
I think just I feel. Sorry, we did it again. Go on, Lorraine.
I was just going to say, I think just the fact that we're actually having this conversation is a really positive thing. The fact that we're talking about prison education, the fact that we've got some statistics about the levels of neurodivergence, you know, we wouldn't have been in this position just a few years ago. So I think that's a really big positive.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I dug out some statistics before this evening, and since April this year, we've supported nationally across all of the prison providers around 30,000 prisoners with neurodiverse needs. So I think we've come a long way. We've still got kind of plenty of kind of distance still to travel, but I think we've improved considerably the systems and processes that did exist, and they continue to evolve to ensure the very best outcomes for some of the most vulnerable prisoners that we have in our prisons nationally. And I think we would both fight to the nth degree, Lorraine, to be able to get the right things in place for those individuals, because they are often the forgotten part of society, and they deserve equal and fair access to the support that can be available for them.
Lovely. Well, that's a lovely final comment to leave us on this evening, Sarah. And yeah, we have come to the end. I said we wouldn't have any problem filling an hour, didn't I? I knew we would. It just leaves me to say thank you so much again for your time, for being able, as you say, it's lovely that we're discussing about it. And as a comment came up a minute, we've got to keep the conversation going. It's hugely important. And so let's keep our fingers crossed that all of these improvements keep working the same way that they are now. Thank you, ladies, very, very much. Sarah, Lorraine, your time is, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you. And good evening to everybody else. Bye-bye.
Bye.